Hi, and welcome to video 2 on how to set up MVEA Stage 2. In video 2, we're looking at creating the view edit record and linking to that view edit record. So let's get on to it. If we have a look at where we are so far, we've created the business organizational model. And we can open that up in Visio and look at it in Visio Online, which is great. Now these shapes, of course, have got data. They linked to the back-end data, and we can see that here. We can look at the shape info here, which is great. So it's a great way of seeing more information about the various shapes that we have, particularly the applications. But it would be nice if we could then have a drop-down capability or a hyperlink capability to open up the actual record behind it so that we could make changes, which means we can then use this Visio Online as an interactive tool. So this is how to set that up. In the actual catalog, of course, here are all the records and here are the catalogs. And we can get an idea of the URL that's used if we click on these three vertical dots and we look at copy link, and we actually copy that link. And now if I move to a new tab and paste that link in, you can see the link it's actually one of the SharePoint short links. But if we open it up, you can see that this then translates to this particular URL, which is linking to the full EAR. So this is your site, and then lists application catalog, and as you can see, display form and ID number 1. So that gives you a direct link to that first ID or first record. If, for example, we just change that to 2. It changes that record, and we're now looking at record number 2. So that's a particularly useful URL, and what we want to do is now capture that and add that in as a field within the application catalog. So if I could just copy this at this point, and now going back to the application catalog, if we now go to list settings, we're going to now create a new field in here, which will be what we call a calculation field. So if we do a create column here, and I'm going to call it view/edit record, and we're going to make it a calculated field, and that calculated field will be equal. It's very much like Excel, open brackets, double quotes, and then that string that we put in, we'll actually just remove that 2 and close that quotes, put in an ampersand, and then we can put in the field ID. Now this actually won't work properly, but I'll show you the steps that you take to make it work properly. So if I click on OK, that should then create that field. If we now go to the application catalog, it all looks great in the sense that there's the view edit record that's been created, and as you can see here, it has that ID in place, which would all seem reasonable, but there's a bit of a problem with it. If we open this record and make any change at all, for example, add a note here, and then save that, we'll now see that it has now actually removed that field, that value, ID1. I don't quite know whether this is a bug or a planned feature, but it creates a problem for us. So that every time we edit it, it seems to then remove that particular value of that's using ID. So if we go take a look at the view edit record here, that's creating a problem, right? So ID, as you can see, isn't listed here as being an available field, but clearly you can reference it but clearly it has a problem. It seems to reset it. So what we therefore have to do now is create a new field, which I'm calling hide ID, which will be a copy of that. So if I do a create column here, and I'll change this to hide ID. Oops, hide ID, and I'm going to use single text, not number, at this point. And what we can do is create it as a calculated field as well, and we could say, well, what you're going to do is make that equal to ID. But of course, that's not going to work, because it's actually going to be the same problem that we've had prior. In other words, as soon as we edit that record, we will now lose that. So we're going to leave that as a text field at this point, and click on OK. And what I will do now is show you how we then create a view, which I'll call, I'll save this view as, call it update hide ID. I'll hide this one so that it's not a public view, so it doesn't become available. And what we're going to do is edit this view such that we will add in the ID and make it the first field, and we'll add in hide ID and make it the second field. This view then has them here, and what we're going to do is copy. I'm going to edit this in grid view, and we're just going to, so that's it, shift and click, and then we can drag this across. I'm sorry, it's taking a little while, but that's now copied. And then you would do that for every single one of those. I will just leave it for the moment for this first page. But that means we now have hide ID equaling ID. And what we can now do is edit here, go back in, and we'll go back to the normal view here, all items view, and we will now go to the list settings, and edit the view edit record, and instead of hide ID, instead of ID, we will have hide ID. And that now will work even if you edit the fields, as we can see. Now, what we have now is the correct value here. Okay, that's great. So how does that help us? What we now need to do is open up the Visio file. And as that comes up, we'll now need to do a refresh of the application catalog. Refreshing that data will now bring in your view edit record. And that's, oops, that exists here. We don't really need hide ID, but that's okay. And we now need to tell Visio that that is actually a hyperlink. So if we do a column setting, that's a right mouse button click, and then a column setting, we'll go down to the hide ID here. The view edit record here. Change the data type, make it a hyperlink. And now, let's just save that. And if we now go here and refresh this, as you can see, as we scroll over this, we have a view edit record, and it's a control click to get there. So if we control click that, that will now open up the correct record so that we can now edit that. So we've created now an interactive capability with this graphical view, such that you can go in and edit things, getting things right. It makes it easier for users to manipulate and add or update the data and make it correct. We can add other things as well, which I will talk about in another video. Thanks so much. Hope that helps.